I'm Frank West, photojournalist.
A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi.
What is going on, guys? My name is Dpurdd, and today we are going to be looking back at a game from the Xbox 360 era that hits me right in the nostalgia. I'm talking about Capcom's Dead Rising. This is going to be a video covering the first title solely and not the works by Capcom Vancouver. We'll take a look at those down the line if people want to see those, but I figured in any case we'd start at the beginning of the franchise. We're going to be covering the entire game from start to finish, so let me preface this video by saying that there will be spoilers. If you have not played through Dead Rising, I mean, what are you doing? This game came out 15 years ago. But if you would like to experience it for yourself, I would suggest doing that first before watching this. Before we start, I ask that you like this video and subscribe. With how much work goes into these videos, the love keeps me motivated to continue making them. Let's begin. Initially released on August 8th, 2006 as an Xbox 360 exclusive, Dead Rising quickly became a commercial success. It was later introduced into the Platinum Hit series of games on Xbox 360 and birthed the franchise, housing several installments. Capcom also decided to branch out from under Microsoft's nest and released a remake of this classic on the Wii just 3 years after initial release in 2009. And then again 10 years after release for its 10th anniversary on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Before we go any further, what is Dead Rising? Well, you're Frank West.
I've covered wars, you know.
A hard-edged photojournalist hell-bent on investigating the mystery at Willamette Mall. It's swarming with zombies and you have 72 hours to complete your investigative story and leave the mall. Everything and anything is a weapon. The game begins on a helicopter with pilot Ed DeLuca and freelance photojournalist Frank West flying over Willamette, Colorado. Frank was tipped off about something big and decides to pursue it for the big scoop. They see some action down below in the streets, but don't exactly know what to make of it. Look, Ed and Frank can clearly see that these are zombie hordes in the street. Even after Frank zooms in and clear as day can see people being eaten and ravaged by zombies, he remains clueless as to what's going on. This entire intro scene with Ed is only here to really serve as a tutorial for the photography mechanic. This sort of sets the tone for the game. Frank's a journalist, so getting shots with your camera is pretty vital, especially if it's your first playthrough and you need experience. More on the whole experience mechanic in a little bit. Now, where were we? After Frank's photo shoot, he decides he wants to be dropped off on the roof of the Willamette Mall to investigate this further. At which point they agree that 3 days will be when Ed comes back to pick up Frank because that'll give Frank enough time to get his story. This is when Ed gets flanked by military aircraft and Frank needs to jump onto the roof of the mall.
No, I'm gonna get my butt chewed out for this one.
The moment Frank steps foot off the plane, you'll notice a timer pop up starting at 72 hours and counting down. That whole interaction with Ed was real. You actually have 72 in-game hours before he comes back for you. This is a good thing and a bad thing in terms of gameplay. It's good because at the time it was a pretty original concept, and it also made things fairly immersive. It kept the game moving because you knew you wouldn't spend too much time on one activity due to the timer looming over you. It was bad because of this exact reason, though. You knew you couldn't spend too much time on one activity because you had a timer looming over you. It could cause players to either miss content or cause players to stand around with nothing to do waiting for the story to advance. Sometimes you don't feel like saving everybody under the sun. Sometimes you just want to play the story. In cases like this, you'll find yourself standing around for a little while. The timer was taken with split reactions. Some people loved it and some people hated it. Personally, I think it's what made Dead Rising, and it's what made later installments feel a little less like Dead Rising. Well, that coupled with a number of other factors. And going back to the story, missions in this game are known as mission scoops. Failing to complete one of these scoops will result in the entire rest of the story becoming unplayable. You can still play through your 72 hours at the Willamette Mall, but you won't be able to complete this game's story and achieve a rewarding ending during that playthrough. You will get one ending though, there's 6 of them. On the roof of the mall, Frank is greeted by an extremely sketchy fella known as Carlito. He blabbers on telling Frank that he's the only journalist who made it out to the mall and explains the zombie situation.
Doesn't sound like civil disobedience. It's too quiet.
Almost as if everyone's already dead.
From this point, Frank continues on into the mall where he finds himself in the security room and gives his attention to a couple security screens. He sees a woman get surrounded and assaulted by zombies trying to get into her car in the parking lot. With this, Frank heads down the security hallway into the entrance plaza, and we get our first glimpse at the situation in front of us. People are barricading the entrance in an attempt to stop or slow down the horde in front of them.
If those ain't zombies, What would you call him?
This lady is freaking out about her missing dog,
I can't live without my precious little sweetie doggy.
and this guy wants help.
All right, then. Feel like making yourself useful?
After ogling a pretty girl who is very relevant to the story,
Hey, this is no time to ogle pretty girls, son.
Frank agrees to help the man find items to barricade the doors with. And as he heads to the back of the front of Entrance Plaza in search of barricading items, he's harassed by this old man. He decides to snap a few photos of him. For context, this girl is this guy's younger sister. Remember that. After that goes down, this old bat spots her dog out in the entrance and decides to adjust the barricade so she can slip through for her dog. I don't know how she was planning on handling this situation, but moving the only thing between you and an actual horde of zombies to save your dog is pretty selfish. Unfortunately for her, things don't go as planned and she becomes compromised by zombies. Her action of moving the barricade snowballs and leads to the mall filling up with zombies. Luckily, Brad, Homeland Security agent, comes to save the day. It turns out that Brad, his partner Jesse, and Otis, a mall janitor who's dead pressed on calling you if he so much as sees his own shadow, have been manning the security room as their little base of operations. It's at this point we find out that Brad and Jesse are looking for this weird old man who's in Entrance Plaza. Anyway, Brad decides to weld the main door shut, rendering it useless.
As long as those things are in the mall, we better not use this door.
But figures that zombies are too stupid to use the air ducts as transportation.
The air ducts. They'll get us back into the mall, and apparently those things aren't smart enough to use the ducts.
Upon leaving the security room via the duct for the first time, we're given our first look at the survivor AI as we match up husband Jeff and wife Natalie, who ended up getting separated 25 feet from each other on this roof. Are you kidding me? After getting them back together, you can escort them back to the safe room for a good chunk of experience, which is known in Dead Rising as prestige points. Be warned, this is the cleanest encounter in terms of survivor AI in this entire game, so enjoy it. We'll get back to this point shortly. Frank continues his way into the mall and has a run-in with Jesse, who ends up nearly shooting him.
God, it's you. Look, don't sneak up on me.
Jessie falls and injures her leg, but she must have hit her head too, because for whatever reason this Homeland Security agent decides to give her firearm to Frank, a man who admits that he's better at shooting photos than shooting guns, and then entrust him to defend her partner who's being attacked in the food court. From this point, the game sort of opens up. You're pushed in the direction of going to save Brad from being attacked, but you can let that play out how it will and then go and do your own thing. Anyway, in our case, Frank entertains Jessie considering her injury is his fault and goes to save Brad. Who is Brad being attacked by? None other than Carlito from the roof a couple minutes ago. This is the first look at Dead Rising's iteration of psychopaths, or bosses. We'll touch on psychopaths more in depth later on. Anyway, after whittling his health down to nothing, he ends up escaping with some of that juicy plot armor. With this, you and Brad go to check on Dr. Barnaby in Entrance Plaza. That's right, this old geezer has a name. He refuses our escort to the security room until a safe exit is absolutely guaranteed. He's a smart man.
If you could just kindly come with us, we can wrap this whole thing up.
No, I'm not leaving until you can guarantee me safe passage.
Just open
to
this gate. Just open this gate. It's for your protection.
And while we're on the topic of escorting survivors, let's use some of this time to go over survivors. We had our first encounters with a couple of them earlier on. I'm talking about Jeff and Natalie on the roof, remember? These encounters take place all throughout the game though. Generally you're notified by Otis via walkie-talkie, but you can bump into them in the wild. The fact that they're here is a good thing. It's a good thing that there is filler content to keep us busy through downtime. You can even give them weapons to try to help them survive. The bad thing is the survivors' AI. Their pathfinding and overall AI is absolutely atrocious. It's some of the worst in AAA gaming. Look at this. A killer clown wielding 2 chainsaws held this man hostage on a roller coaster and set the speed to max. I killed the clown, turned off the roller coaster, promised this guy a safe haven, and gave him one of the clown's chainsaws. This is how he repaid me. It's not like you just have a couple of survivors to save either. There are a bunch of them throughout a playthrough. That's a big part of this game. So the fact that the AI is as bad as it is makes that portion of the game much less fun to visit than others. You can skip out from saving survivors, but aside from that and wandering the mall aimlessly stocking up on supplies, there really isn't much else to do unless Otis is hitting your line with some new knowledge on a psychopath.
You used to call me on my cell phone.
With that said, this game was originally developed in the early 2000s and the technology wasn't quite what it is today. I'll give the wonky survivor AI a pass, but if you are planning a playthrough for yourself, just know that this is something you're gonna have to deal with. It's bad. It's about this time that the sun begins to go down on day one, and this means two things for Frank and our crew. It means, well, obviously visibility is at an all-time low, but it also means that zombies become notably stronger, faster, and more aggressive than their daily counterparts. If you aren't equipped, you probably don't want to be wandering the mall while the sun's down. I don't know how you wouldn't be equipped. At this point you've taken on at least one psychopath. This was day one. We still have 2 days to go. Before we continue, I want to catch up on a few things if you've missed anything. Psychopaths are the bosses throughout the Dead Rising franchise. Generally, these psychopaths, at least in the first game, are humans who have gone criminally insane due to the nature of the zombie apocalypse. Seeing loved ones eaten in front of you and watching the world come to an end as you know that will do that to someone. You'll get tipped off by Otis of these psychopaths. There are a total of 19 of them, ranging between an insane family of sniper-wielding hunters, an overprotective grocery store manager, a literal cult leader, a butcher, a clown, and many more. You run into them based on your progression throughout the game. Most are optional, but by completing them, you are rewarded with new areas, new survivors to save, and unique weapons. Earlier on, I brought up prestige points, and I just want to touch base on these. Prestige points are experience points in the Dead Rising series. In the first game, the prestige point system works as follows. Frank earns these points from doing a number of activities. These include completing scoops, rescuing survivors, completing photo opportunities, killing zombies and psychopaths, among others. As you earn these prestige points, you'll notice the gauge under Frank's life bar fill up. Leveling up affects your health, strength, inventory space, your skills, your throwing distance, and your running speed. On day 2, Frank and Brad return to Entrance Plaza for Dr. Barnaby after Frank forgot to mention that he actually does have a guaranteed exit the first time around. That exit with Ed. Here, Frank and Brad have another scuffle with Carlito. Upon winning, we secure the bag. I mean this old bag. And we make our way to the security room. It's at this point that we learned about just why Brad and Jesse are looking for Dr. Barnaby. Dr. Barnaby's former research laboratory was based in Santa Cabeza. Spoiler alert, the town was destroyed by this accidental zombie outbreak and was cleaned up by the special forces, who we'll be seeing later on. Brad and Jesse, being a part of the Department of Homeland Security, are looking for leads into this zombie outbreak. Dr. Barnaby perks up when he hears the crew talking about Santa Cabeza, but refuses to give out any information on the subject after seeing Frank with his camera. Day 2 ends with Otis spotting Isabella riding a motorcycle through North Plaza and Frank pursuing her for information regarding Santa Cabeza. They get into a scuffle, but after a little interrogation, she agrees to meet with Frank in an empty store at midnight. Right at midnight on day 3, Frank meets with Isabella in this empty store in North Plaza where she explains that she's been shot in the arm by Carlito. She then passes out and Frank carries her back to the security room. Upon Isabella waking up, all hell breaks loose. It turns out that Dr. Barnaby's research lab is the facility that created an insect that would turn living creatures into zombies. At this point, Dr. Barnaby himself begins to turn into a zombie and attacks Jesse. Before fully turning, Frank manages to get some information out of him regarding his lab and how it was an attempt to create a cheaper cattle breeding method to meet the rising demand for meat in America. Roughly 8 hours pass before we hear an announcement over the mall's intercom system. The announcement is coming from Carlito. He's apologizing to Isabella for hurting her, but also demanding her return.
Right.
You know I'm right.
Gotcha.
Come back to me, Isabel. There are still things you need to know. I can't do this without you. Please.
She doesn't respond, so he says he's going to end it all. His plan is to blow up the mall by spreading bombs throughout the maintenance tunnels, sending parasitic larvae all throughout the atmosphere and spreading the zombie plague across the country. A little dramatic, eh, Carlito? With this, Frank and Brad head down into the maintenance tunnels to collect the bombs. This turns into a little game of cat and mouse between Carlito, you, and Brad, but naturally the good guys come out on top. Kind of. Frank collects the bombs, but on his way out of the parking garage, they end up exploding. Due to the low concentration of the gas, there isn't much damage done at all. A nice twist of events. It's at this point that Brad and Carlito have an exchange down here in the maintenance tunnels. Brad shoots Carlito in the stomach, but Carlito stabs Brad in the back. Brad ends up getting overwhelmed with zombies, and Frank is left to continue back to the security room alone.
Well, shit.
Frank's next course of action is to escort Isabella to Carlito's hideout over in the North Plaza by the gun shop. Isabella attempts to gain access to Carlito's laptop, but it's no use. She doesn't know the password, and these two aren't exactly tech gurus. Jessie calls Frank over his walkie-talkie and tells him to get back to the security room because she saw something she wants to share. What she saw is Carlito being drugged through the maintenance tunnels and heading into the meat processing area right by the butcher shop. This massive individual dragging him is Larry Chang, the butcher. There's no reason why Larry captured Carlito, he just sees him as a piece of meat to eat. You end up fighting Larry, but to no avail because after you defeat him, Carlito ends up kicking the bucket, but not before handing a locket to Frank to be delivered to Isabella. Frank goes back to the hideout to deliver the news of Carlito's death to Isabella, who is hurt but also takes it with a bit of relief. He gives her the locket, which has a family photo, but also reminds her of a word.
Pachamama.
The word means Mother Earth and was often used by their parents. It turns out this word ends up being the password for the computer, and she's able to get into it and turn off the jamming device that's disabling anybody from reaching the outside world. With this, Jessie calls Frank to let him know that she's going to call for backup. She ends up making the call, but then calls Frank to let him know that headquarters denies any knowledge of the activities there. She tells him that Special Forces agents will arrive at midnight to begin cleanup. They arrive and attempt to take Jessie into custody, but she has other plans.
If you sign an agreement to keep your mouth shut about all this, you'll be free to go.
We learn that Otis and all of the survivors are safe. Apparently, Otis has a small aircraft license and hijacked a plane on the roof. Good for you, Otis. At this point, the mall is cluttered with Special Forces agents who arrive for cleanup under orders of one Brock Mason. These agents only stick around until 10 a.m. the next day, but if you aren't equipped for it, these guys can be hard to handle.
Fighting back. Emergency backup.
Once the agents withdraw, Frank and Isabella make their way to the helipad where Ed dropped Frank off on day one. They are expecting Ed, and they see him coming. Oh, I mean, they see him going. How in the hell did this zombie get on the plane anyway? With this, Frank and Isabella make their way back to Carlito's hideout where Frank discovers he's been infected.
You must have gotten yourself infected somehow.
Isabella asks Frank to gather supplies to make Frank a vaccine. This vaccine is known as plot armor. I call it plot armor because apparently for a short period of time after receiving the vaccine, zombies don't like the pheromones you produce.
They think it smells bad?
It's at this exact moment that Frank remembers a giant hole he saw in the clock tower in the center of the courtyard where Ed's helicopter crashed. This hole is like a tunnel or a cave, and Frank believes it could be a way out. With Isabella's vaccine, this could be the perfect synergy. The rest of this game is played without any weapons. Frank and Isabella get to the end of the zombie-infested tunnel and end up stealing a military vehicle with a turret on the back. Isabella hops on the turret, and phase 1 of the final boss fight begins. You need to take down Brock's XM3 prototype tank. While completely unexpected, this is a fairly boring fight consisting of shooting the lights around the tank and whittling down its damage. At this point, Brock switches his tank from automatic to manual and rams the ever-living shit out of Frank and Isabella. Brock gives a short villain speech, and while he's looking the other way distracted by zombies, Frank sneaks up on the tank and delivers a sneak attack starting phase 2. This is a fist fight between Frank and Brock that ends with Brock falling off of the tank into a sea of zombies. The game ends with a shot of Isabella peering over to Frank as he has a mental breakdown. Rightfully so, this man went from a freelance photojournalist to apocalyptic warlord. Upon completion of the true ending, you can start Infinity Mode. The goal of Infinity Mode is to keep Frank alive for as long as possible. Food and drinks don't respawn, you can't save, you don't have access to your watch or your camera, and both psychopaths and survivors appear at different locations other than 72-hour mode, all of them being hostile and your only way to restock food. And that was the first Dead Rising from start to finish. While this game is credited as a commercial success, I feel like it doesn't receive enough credit. This single game spawned a franchise that as of March 2021 has sold over 14 million units worldwide. And this first game in particular is special to me just because of how nostalgic it is to me. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Let me know what games you'd like to see me cover next down in the comments. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
I've covered wars, you know.